Well, good morning. It is so good to see all of you and all of you who are joining us online. And of course, if this is your first time here, great to have you. We've been in this series, and where Jesus has these repeating lines where he says, "You have heard it said," and he's taking this Old Testament passage, and then he says, "But I say to you." And he's helping us to understand what Scripture is really pointing to. And this morning, we're going to hit a subject that I think will hit home for all of us, if not most of us, in a way that just and I hope it makes us wrestle with it a little bit here, because I think this one can do that. He's going to kind of hit at our heart a little bit with this one. So it deals with the issue of fairness, or at least what we perceive to be fair. And I think that comes through for all of us. Let me share this story with you. So back, it's been a bit when we had cable for our TV. And the cable company, I can't even remember what the name of the cable company was, they sent me a letter in the mail, and it was this terrific offer because our subscription was going to end soon, and it was this thing I don't know, if you signed up for 18 months or something, they'd give us this special deal, and it was really good. So I call them on the phone to get the deal on this, this 18-month subscription or whatever. And I remember the guy on the other side says, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. That deal isn't for existing customers." And I'm like, "Okay, but you sent me a letter, with my name on it, you offered it to me, so give me the deal, right?" And he's like, "No, sir, I'm sorry. That's and I'm like, "Well, why did you send me the letter?" And he's like, "Well, we sent that out." And I'm like, "No, you sent me a letter with my name on it. I should get this deal." And he's like, "Well, no," because, he's trying to explain this. And I said, "Okay, so, then I'm going to cancel my subscription, because then I'll sign up," right? And I'm trying to be kind of clever in this. And he goes, "Oh, that won't work either, because this is a promotion item, and it's not for former customers either." I'm like, Oh, and then I went back to, "But you sent me a letter, right, with my name on it," right? And so somehow I ended up, I think I said that enough that he was just like, "I'm gonna have you talk to my supervisor," right, in this thing. So then I'm talking to the supervisor and explaining, "You sent me a letter, right? And now you want," and of course this guy's like, "Sorry, that's not for current or former customers. It's for brand new customers only." And I'm going off well, then why did you send me a letter, telling me about this thing if you weren't going to give it to me or whatever, and going through the whole thing. And finally I just said, I'm going to cancel my subscription." He goes, "Okay, but that's not going to help you sign up for this." I go, no, because this is not fair. So I'm going to cancel my subscription. So and then of course he's like, "Well, I can't do that. I have to send you to the cancellation department or whatever." And I was just like, this is so unfair. So I did that. I was going to stay on the phone however long I had to stay on the phone to cancel that, this cable company. I canceled them. And the deal I ended up getting eventually was way worse than the deal I already had. But I didn't care, because that wasn't fair that I didn't get to, the promotional thing. And then, of course, I had to explain to the kids, "What's wrong with the TV?" Well, you see, we were being treated really unfair. They weren't going to give us the deal, even after they mailed us a letter. And, my kids were like, "Oh, Dad, great defender of fairness in our family. I'm so glad you did that." No, they were like, "You did what?" I said, "Well, I canceled the cable because it wasn't fair." And they're like, But why? Why would you do that? Now we have no TV, Dad. It just became a thing. And there's moments where we can think, we'll fight for this sense of fairness, no matter what, because we read this as this deep kind of value in something, even to the point, right? Even to the point where maybe it's not really in our best interest in this. And I bring this up because this issue of fairness that we all feel at different levels or whatever, this isn't new to us. This has been true for humanity always. And what we're going to see this morning is Jesus, he's gonna he's gonna hit on our sense of fairness as he's seeking to point us a different direction. And of course, in Jesus's day, as he would have been reading the scriptures that they had, which we would understand as being the Old Testament, they actually had a lot of verses dealing with this whole issue or idea that we would think of is fairness. In fact, he's going to quote something that's gonna come from several of these passages. And so I wanna read you a couple of these passages in there. In fact, there's probably at least 3 that in one way or another Jesus is quoting in the passage we're gonna look at. But if you want, you don't have to, but if you want, you can turn in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 21, starting in verse 23, because this is gonna be one of the passages Jesus is gonna quote part of. It says this, but if there is serious injury, he says, like someone doesn't give you the deal they promised you, in a letter, right? But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, he says. Dang, right? Verse 24, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise, right? And he's talking about this thing. So like if there's conflict or someone hurts you or something gets out of hand, this is how you're to settle this in this moment. And we listen, and it's like wound for wound, like, fracture for fracture. Man, this sounds a little barbaric. And you know why it sounds a little barbaric? Because this was the age of barbarians, okay? This was written a long time ago. This was actually written back in what would be considered the late Bronze Age, somewhere probably 13 to 1400 BC. This is being written. And of course, during this time, so much of the population of the globe were nomadic, super tribal. And so if something went south, if someone hurt someone, even if it was for an accident, there could be retaliation. It's did they do that on purpose? Did they and maybe you hurt someone and they hurt you back in a really serious way. And so then, you kill someone in their family, and then they send over somebody and they kill 3 people in your tribe or household, and then you send over a bunch, and there'd be blood feuds that would be terrible at times. And you read these passages, right? And it does sound kind of barbaric in this, but you have to understand, God is actually up to something when he's doing all of this. Let me read you one more. This is found in Leviticus chapter 24, starting in verse 19. It says this, anyone who injures their neighbor is to be injured in the same manner. I love that, right? Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The one who has inflicted the injury must suffer the same injury in this, okay? So again, I want to emphasize this. We see the thing that jumps out is this fairness thing. Whatever happened to you, that's what you get to do, right? This was a huge leap forward, okay, in terms of moving people spiritually to something better from where they were, okay? But we read it, and again, it does sound a little barbaric. Even the part where, if anyone injures their neighbor, they're to be injured in the exact same manner, right? So, your neighbor was up on a ladder, putting up the Christmas lights, and you're walking by and you accidentally bump the ladder and knock them off. And it's okay, George, get up on the ladder because I'm pushing you off. And it's no, it was an accident. Doesn't matter. Right here, I got a verse. This is fair, right? Get on the ladder. It's I don't want to get on the, yeah, the Bible says, this is what's fair because it's even, right? And this is, right? But again, someone in ancient times wouldn't be going, you're gonna make me get on a ladder? You would not knock out a tooth? Here's how they would respond to, knock out a tooth. It'd be just one tooth? Yeah, man, I tell you, you only knock out one, only one of your teeth are missing. You only get to knock out one of their teeth. And it's okay, right? It's this limiting thing. But that doesn't mean that this idea of evenness or what is precisely fair is what God was ultimately after in all of this. So when you get to Jesus's day, you've got to picture people in the first century, right? We're not in the Bronze Age anymore. We're past the Iron Age. We're like in the Classic Age, some 1,300 years later. And they're trying to take the text and go, okay, how do we apply this today? What does this mean for us, okay? And as they looked at the black and white letters of that text, some of the text that I just read to you, what they got fixated on was this sense of fairness. Now, I will say this. They moved past the idea of like doing physical harm to the same degree as what was maybe accidentally or even intentionally done to them. They turned a lot of this into monetary compensation or other things, but they created a massive system of preciseness. We are going to make this exactly fair, because what God wants more than anything else out of this is fairness in this. And they got fixated on that fairness. And as Jesus comes along, he's like, okay, I get that you're looking at this text and it's inspired by God, but you're missing the heart of God in it. You're missing that there's something else in this. And what Jesus does, specifically in the Sermon on the Mount, especially through this one section, is he's trying to say, I need you to see this. Start with me. When you start trying to understand where Scripture is going, I need you to start with me so that you can understand God's heart, so that you know what to do with this. Because if you just start with the black and white letters, you can get to some weird places. You can get to some places where you think you've done the right thing, but really you haven't, right? You think it's all about fairness, but here's the problem. Here's the problem that they faced. And you know what the truth is? 2,000 years after this, Jesus is saying this, we still need to pay attention to Jesus' words, because we can still take the black and white words within Scripture and miss the point of it. And here's the problem. When you look at the Bible and you read passages like we read, and you take even our own desires for fairness, you can have a desire for fairness and end up pursuing fairness in a way that you become the very thing you don't want to become. You can pursue fairness and become the thing that hurts others. Because that's the whole thing that starts this. If someone hurts you, if someone wounds you, what, there's something fair, but you can actually become the thing. Think about this for a moment, right? If we take eye for an eye, right? You poked out my eye. It's only fair. I get to poke out your eye. And what have you just become? The person who pokes out somebody's eye. That's what you become. It's like that simple, right? And Jesus just like, okay, if you think that's what God was really after, you've missed something in all of this, right? If you're at work and someone does something a little deceptive, they take from you, like they take intellectual property, or they just take something out of your lunchbox or something, right? And you're like, well, it's only fair that I take something from you. What do you become? You become the person who takes away from other people. And it's like, is that what you really wanted to be? Do you want to become the person who's doing that thing to someone else that actually brought like pain or hurt to you in this? And this happens with politics, right? Ever have a moment where someone's like, you're just like, oh no, we're gonna get into this, and they're gonna be like, rah, 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 rah. And you're just like, well, I'm gonna give it back to them, and it's like you're becoming that person. Or you know where we face this oftentimes is in traffic when driving, right? Picture, when's the last time you came up to there was a construction zone, and they're moving everybody into one lane and they've got signs and everything, and right, and you're in that group and you all move over to the left lane because that's what you're asked to do, and everyone does it nice and neat the way they're supposed to. And then everything comes to like a grinding halt. And you look in your side view mirror, and there's some guy that comes around the corner. He's way back there, and he's driving up. And in your heart, you picture what's going on, don't you? You're like, he's driving up, and he sees all of these cars in this lane, and there's one big, long, empty lane all the way up there. And you're thinking, don't you do it. Don't you do it. I know what you're thinking. Don't you do it. Now, I don't ever do this, but I'm wondering if maybe some of you have ever done this. Like you're in the line and you're like, as we move forward slowly, I'm going to just kind of move over this way. Not far enough that I lose my place in line, but far enough that it's like, don't you dare. Watch this. I'm going to this is a slow speed cut you off move, right? Yeah. Ever done that? Anyone? And so like all of a sudden, what have you become, right? And you're like, oh, I'm that person that's cutting somebody else off in traffic, right? And it's like you can pursue fairness in a way that maybe makes you or takes you to the place that you don't want to be. So again, think back to these rabbis, these scholars, and they have taken this text that is inspired by God, and 1,000+ years later, they're trying to discern and work on, okay, how do we interpret and how do we apply this? And without realizing it, they start taking those black and white words and they turn it into this thing. This is all about fairness and justice. And what we're gonna see is Jesus is gonna say, I want to pull your heart maybe a little bit of a different direction in this. So let's look at this passage where Jesus actually brings this up. So Matthew chapter 5, look at verse 38. So he says this, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And those were the two examples that you find in every one of these passages that talks about it in the Old Testament, where some of them have ones that are different or whatever, but Jesus quotes these two, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, that you would have found in each of those Old Testament passages. And so everyone that is hearing Jesus say this, the vast majority of them would have been like, oh, I know where he's going, right? This is that Old Testament. And they wouldn't have called it the Old Testament thing at that point. This is that scriptural thing. This is going back to Torah specifically. And they all would have had an assumption about how this gets applied. It's about fairness. And it'd be kind of weird. Like, Jesus, like you're not going to undo this one, right? And then Jesus starts, I love how he redirects this. Look at verse 39. Here's what he says. But I tell you, right? So this is this thing that he does. You have heard it said, right? But I tell you, let me give you the proper understanding of what these passages were actually, what God was really wanting to do with them. Right? He's not saying, oh, ignore that. He's saying, no, you need to understand what God was intending long-term to do with these passages. And so here's what he says in verse 39. He says, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Now, let me give you just a little background on a couple of vocabulary words here that will help us understand what Jesus is doing here, provide some depth to it. So, evil person in the Greek is one word. It's one word, and it's paneros. And it comes from a root word that is panos. And panos in Greek is simply the word for pain, And so literally what Jesus is doing here in this is describing the person that causes you pain. So sometimes, and I say this because sometimes when we read evil person, right, we think of like, there's that person, right, that's like really evil. They just like doing evil things. And that's not what he's getting at here. When it says, and some of you may have a different way that they translated that, but the idea is There's that person who's caused you pain. They've done something and it just felt unfair. And you know, the reality is that person who caused you pain, it could be a loved one. It could be someone you care about. It could be a neighbor. It could be a friend. It's just what he's pointing out here is we're going to go through life and there's going to be moments where people are going to cause you pain. And it can be at any level. It can be the thing, maybe they said something disparaging about you. Some of their baggage came out and it wounded you because they shamed you or put you down or they became manipulative in some moment. Or it's like there was a disagreement between you and that person. And out of that disagreement, you're just like, man, you became attacking and you like, and this hurts in this. And so he's saying it's the person who causes you pain. The other word in here is resist. So he says, do not resist, right? The person who causes you pain. And the word resist here is, the root is a steme, which is a word that tons of other Greek words come out of. And it's simply the word to stand. To stand. So it's kind of interesting. You can put all these different prefixes on it or reorganize this word and get all of these other words. For instance, if you put the prefix ana, which means like up, to stand, and you put ana in front of it, it becomes the word for resurrection. So in the Bible, when it talks about resurrection, it's actually this same root word. If you put the prefix apo in front of it, apo means like a way. It becomes the Greek word for a certificate of divorce. Because what you're saying is it's like this declaration, you have to stand away, like we're not together. Like it's this, and that's the word that they chose for like a certificate of divorce. So this word that is used here in Matthew is two words. It's a steme, it's the word for stand, and it combines it with the Greek word anti, which we get our English word, guess what? Anti. So it's anti-stand. It's like I stand against you. And it perfectly describes the posture we take like internally or in our heart when we're wounded by somebody. It's like, oh, you wounded me. I am now anti-you. Like you did something unfair. So now, like I am anti-you. I'm going to force you, right, to offer the thing that'll be fair to me in this moment. And all of a sudden when Jesus says this, so picture what Jesus is saying. It's like, I know that like you take these Old Testament passages and what you think God is after is just like, well, okay, you get hurt, you get what's fair and not one thing more. And that's how they would have seen it. It's just like you get fairness and nothing more. And it becomes this huge thing about fairness. And what Jesus is saying is like, okay, but what you're talking about is this huge argument or standard between fairness between people and how these people behave and how these people see each other. And what Jesus is saying is, I get the fairness component of it, but the fairness was not an end unto itself. It wasn't about getting perfect fairness. It was actually about how people were relating to each other. And the fairness was an important step forward for those people 1,300 years ago to stop killing off each other, in droves and actually moving towards fairness. But ultimately, God was wanting them to take a different posture in the way they would see and relate and understand each other, right? Because the reality is, God's heart is, regardless of what someone does or doesn't do to you, He doesn't want you to become the kind of person that will hurt others the way you were hurt. See the difference, right? And so he's like, this is way beyond fairness. It's about who you're becoming in this. This is, to have that understanding, all of a sudden helps us understand how to see and understand these passages. Because here's the reality, friends. You can be filled with a drive for fairness and land in a place far from what you really want. It happens to us. It was happening in the first century. Here just recently, I took my daughter on a trip to Costa Rica as a graduation gift for graduating from college. And so we we spent a week there and had the best time because she's the adventurous one in the family. And we did all of the, all the crazy things from bungee jumping and cliff diving and the whatever you do on the cable when you slide down the cable, that everyone else in my family would just be like, no, can we just stay home and read, right? And we're like, fine, no. So there was one evening after we had a great day, playing in the rainforest, that we went into this huge souvenir shop. And in this, this souvenir shop was maybe almost as big as this room. It was this massive thing. And it had all of these things made by, local people in the area, just like what you'd think of as souvenirs. And they had all of this stuff that was made out of wood, including this whole huge section of all of these toys, like these toy cars and trucks and stuff. And this young family walked in, and they had this little boy, and they got him a toy truck. And so they go and they pay for it, and somewhere after they paid for it and before they got to the car, this truck broke, right? And the mom comes walking back in, and she's got the truck, and there's like a fender and a tire that, a little wooden tire that were broke. And she's like, this broke. She goes up to the lady at the counter, and she goes, it broke. And apparently, the little boy dropped it or something somewhere around the threshold of the front door of this place. He drops it, it breaks, and the mom comes back and says, can we get another one? And the lady at the counter is like, I'm sorry, but like you already paid for it and took it out, and so I can't replace it. Of which she's not real happy about this, and she leaves. I don't think anything of it, and the next thing I know, the dad is now back in with his son and his wife, and he's like, no. Like you need to replace this. Like, this shouldn't have broken this way. And the lady at the counter is like, no. You bought it, walked out, and it broke. We're not responsible. It was a functioning, toy truck when we handed it off to you. And all of a sudden they got into this argument like, okay, what's fair in this moment? And you watch their arguments between fairness. And it's not long before it's no longer, because it first started off with like, okay, but you walked out the door. And the guy goes, yeah, but I'm still on the property. And so yeah, but you paid for it. Yeah, but your kid is the one that broke it. Yeah, well, what you make is trashy stuff. And I say trashy stuff. That is a loose translation of some other words I can't say right now, right? He went on with some very cool ways to describe all of the merchandise in this place, right? And he's like, you're making junk and this is not right, and just, and so they go back and forth, and the clerk, she is refusing to do this. And so when the guy accuses her of being a part of an outfit that is intentionally selling broken down, junk, she goes, well, maybe if you taught your kid how to value things and take care of it, it wouldn't have broken, right? And I was just like, oh my gosh, I was just trying to ask, which set of coffee beans are more smooth, and I just will wait to ask my coffee questions until later. And they go, and it just blew up into this thing, to the point that at one point, like, she's calling for her manager. The manager showed up and then left. I don't know why. He solved nothing. And the guy is demanding that he get a new truck. And then finally he goes, well, and he takes another truck, a new one, off the shelf. And he goes, there's, your blankety blank blank truck, and put it back on the shelf, and then starts to walk out like this, like, you're gonna stop me? And she goes, I'm gonna call the policia on you if you step out the door. And I remember I was just like, and this is like 10 minutes after I had left. I came back, right? And now I've just got chocolates, I just wanna know something about the chocolates here. And he's doing this thing through the doorway, and he's like, you gonna call the cops now? Yeah, yeah. And it had the automatic doors, and they were like, open, close. And it's just like, and she's like, got her hand on the phone, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, Now, here's the sad thing though, right? Both of them are arguing like this, like fairness, you owe me. They're both seeing the other as the anti. I am anti-you, because you're the one that's hurting me right now. You are keeping me from what is fair. There's a dad who's defending his son in this moment, right? I'm gonna do what's fair for my son. You owe him a new truck. And there's a clerk who's like, no, I'm defending, my store, right? I can't just let people, break stuff and then expect us to replace it in this moment, right? I look at this little boy, who is bawling his eyes out and has been crying and bawling his eyes out, right? And the clerk, right? She's got a customer that's just like, I don't know what to do with the chocolate or the coffee, right? And it's like, maybe they missed what was most important. He is there trying to defend the fairness of his son. His son's night is wrapped, right? He has watched his mom and dad arguing this out in some terrible way, right? And the clerk, right, everybody in the store, like, she's not created a better situation for all of this. But by golly, these two people were not going to give an inch based on what they thought was fair. But the question they never asked? Who do I want to be? Do I want to be the dad who models this to my son? Do I want to be the dad that in the name of fairness has like they were on a family vacation, right? To have fun and enjoy themselves. Well, that was an enjoyable night for that family, right? See? And so what Jesus says in this moment is he's saying, listen, I understand how you've taken this verse, an eye for an eye, a tooth. I understand the fairness thing. But can I tell you, can I help you understand God's heart? Because God's heart is not just that you become more fair. Like, that's a good thing. But God's heart is that you become something way more than just someone who fights for fairness in this way. Because you can fight for fairness and be someone you don't want to be. That's the issue. And what he's saying is, don't become the anti-person because someone was doing that to you. See? And so then he goes on and he walks this out just a little bit more in this. And I want to just take a moment or two and look at some practical examples that he gives as he kind of challenges all of them to take scripture and now live it out in a way that's actually aligned with God's heart. And so he goes on and he says this. Look at verse 39. He's going to go through several examples. And I don't know that we'll go through all of them, but we'll go through a few of them here. Look at verse 39. He says this. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Now, classically, like, this passage gets so often about, like, okay, someone hits you, just here, hit me back, right? And there's something that kind of falls kind of weird with us on that one, because it just seems like, is it all about weakness and just run away? And the reality is no. And you have to remember this. In as much as Jesus was trying to help this group of people understand a passage of Scripture 1,300 years prior. Here we sit 2,000 years after Jesus says this, and we're like, okay, we need to try and understand this. So it's worth understanding some unique things about the culture so that we can better understand what Jesus was saying here in this moment. And he says something that you cannot miss. It seems trivial, but it is not. Look back at the verse. He says, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, and here's why that's important, okay? Because if two people are facing each other and someone hits you on the right cheek, if they're gonna hit you with their fist, right, they can't hit you with their right arm on your right cheek. You know, it'd be like a kind of punch. It'd be some weird punch. They'd have to do it with their left hand. And in this culture, kind of a standard understanding is, with most things, you would use your right hand, right? Including if it was like a discipline thing, or even if it was a fighting kind of thing, you would punch someone or slap someone with your right hand. So here's what this means. If you've been slapped on your right cheek, they've not punched you this way, they've not hit, or even slapped you this way. How have they done it? Backhanded, okay? In this culture, one of the most shaming, demeaning things you could do would be to slap someone with the back of your hand. Because culturally, this is treating them as if they're nothing. This is you powering up on this person. This is, right, you're shaming them. This is such an undignified thing for the person you've just slapped. So, with that in mind, right, someone has just hurt you. They have slapped you in this way. But not just in any way, right? This is not two men on the street as equals and they get into a fight and one guy goes, yeah, you know, and I'm gonna punch you, right? That's like hitting equals. If you saw another person, another guy that you saw as your equal, you would never hit them that way. So if you've been hit that way, in a very shaming way, think about what Jesus is saying. Turn the other cheek. You want to hit me that way? You know what I'm going to stand up for in this moment? Is my own dignity. Let them hit you. But you're going to hit me over here. You're going to have to punch me. You're going to have to slap me in a way that says I'm your equal. Now think about that for a moment, what you've just done. You have found a way to stand up to something demeaning, right? You have challenged inappropriate behavior. You have challenged something that is shaming and should not go on. But what have you not done? You've not done the thing done to you. Do you see what Jesus is doing? He's not saying be a weakling, you know, just be a doormat. He's not saying that. What he's saying is find a way, like you can oppose bad things. Jesus opposed people shaming other people. Jesus opposed moments where people did things that were unfair or cruel or mean. But he never did it by becoming the people that were doing the cruel thing. And so the challenge for us is, wow, how if someone's hurt me, everything in me, my sense of fairness, you did that to me, I'm gonna do it back to you. And what Jesus is saying, no. Don't do back what was done to you. But you're allowed to stand up for yourself. You're allowed to stand in a place of dignity. But I challenge you to find a way to do it that doesn't attack them, see? Here's a question you can ask in this. If you feel like someone has shamed you in this way and you're hurting over it, and it's just like, I want to become anti-them, right? Here's a question you can ask yourself in this, and it's this. What do I most want to be when this is done? What do I most want to be when this is done? What do I want to model to the other people around me. I wonder what would have happened if in that souvenir shop, if that dad, right? And let's give him the benefit of the doubt for a moment, right? Let's say it really was terribly made. It was, and at $5, $10, it was completely overpriced, and it was unjust to him. And he's hurt and he's upset on behalf of his son. What if he would have walked back in that souvenir shop thinking about how he will model or affect the rest of the night for his son? If he would have just said, what would bring joy and blessing to my son right now? Maybe I won't start screaming at the person in the shop. Maybe I'll find another way to sort through this. But he didn't. Like, he didn't even notice his son until it was all over. And I know in his heart, he was probably doing that on behalf of his son, but he lost sight of what was most important. And Jesus is saying, you're gonna get hurt in this life. You're gonna have the person who's gonna cause you pain. But as you react, think about who you want to become most. And in the end, that's what he was doing back 1,300 years before this, right? It's just, he's trying to move a group of people that are kind of in a barbaric time in the world. And he's just moving them forward a little bit. But the goal was to have them become something different, relationally and as their own people. Let's look at least one more, maybe two. We'll see. There's another one, verse 39. Look at this one. He says, if anyone slaps you on the, I'm sorry, wrong one. We already did that one. Verse 40, look at verse 40. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well, right? And our tendency is, you're gonna sue me, I'm gonna countersue you, right? You're gonna come after me, I'm gonna come after you. You're gonna take from me, I'll take from you, right? There's like, because that's fair in this whole thing. And what Jesus is saying is, like, no, like, that's not my way in all of this. There is a way of pointing out unfairness without attacking the other person. And here's part of the cultural norm that would be important to understand this point. In that verse in Exodus that talks about, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Well, in the very next chapter, Exodus chapter 22, and you can read this on your own sometime, there is an express rule that says that you are not allowed to take someone's coat. In fact, even if they offer it to you in a pledge, like on a loan or whatever, by that evening, you have to return it back to them because you leave them with like nothing. And so if there's a lawsuit and you are suing somebody for their inner garment, their shirt in this, and someone does that to you, don't countersue them. And this is the brilliance of Jesus. Now, I'm not saying what Jesus says is easy, because it's not. What he says is, there's a way to take a stand on this one that's kind of unusual, but it'll work. And what he says is, they're gonna sue you for your shirt. Well, give them your coat. And you do two things in this moment. One, as you hand them your coat, you've just put them in violation of a law. If they're so like, I'm gonna sue you by the law, it's like, well, by the law, it's like it's like, wait a minute, you can take my shirt, you got my coat too. Now you're a lawbreaker in this thing. But also, how are you now dressed standing there in the middle of court? You're probably pretty close to just totally naked, right, okay? And in this culture, the person who would make you naked, more shame would be seen on them than you. And what you have done in a very passive way is you are going to be so frivolous in this moment as to actually fight over, you're gonna sue me for the shirt on my back? And all of a sudden, you standing there naked and they're holding your coat in violation of Exodus 22, it's like everyone's going, yeah, who are you? Like, what are you doing in this moment? Imagine in that souvenir shop, right? So now I want to flip this around. Imagine in that souvenir shop, the clerk behind the counter, right? And she's like, this is not fair, right? He paid for it, but There's a cost on our part on this. And he takes it, and just because he breaks it, nothing against his son, but they broke it, they're responsible. And now they want to throw this back on me, like, no. Like, but what would have happened? What would the customers in the store have done if that clerk would have said, I know I can't return it technically, but I tell you what, reached down in her pocket and pulled out $10 and said, I'll buy your son a brand new truck. Here you go. What's the dad gonna do? Oh, no. You gotta exchange it. It's like, and all the cousins be like, well, you made this poor woman who works here out of her own pocket, buy you a truck when you're the one that's like, everyone would have been like, in that moment, right? And what Jesus is saying is, like, even if it costs you, think about who you want to be. Because maybe there's a way to face injustice, even if it costs you, but maybe what you get to point to with greater clarity is the injustice, with greater clarity, the thing that is wrong, without becoming the person that's just like the person you're trying to point out. See? So again, here's the question. Ask yourself, when this is all over, who do I really want to be? If you ask yourself that question, most of the time, it will guide you in a really healthy way to make choices. And granted, not always easy. They may be sacrificial, they may be hard. But on the other side of it, you won't have a bad conversation with your spouse on the drive home for, why did you do all of that in that store? You'll like who you're becoming. And what Jesus is saying is, I know you have this verse, but if you understand God's heart about it is about you becoming the kind of person you want to be, but also becoming the kind of person that God has called you to be. Let that guide you in there.